Hello, YouTube land. How is everybody doing? Good, I'm glad to hear it. So, friends and foe, grab your camp chairs, your s'mores, hot cocoa, or whatever your drink of choice is when you're sitting around the campfire, and let's have a fireside chat, shall we? Now, this story that I'm about to tell you is a true story. In 2011, my son was showing interest in wanting to go deer hunting for the very first time. My son took his hunter safety course and passed it, was one of the very top kids in his group with all high scores. So we had our hunting rifles, our hunting gear, our knives, and everything we needed for gutting a deer and dressing it and everything. And I had several people tell us, you really want to carry a sidearm, a pistol with you. And I'm thinking, a pistol, why do I need that? I have my rifle. What, do you need it to put the deer out of misery or something? And they're like, no, dude, you need it for the cougar. We have a bad issue with cougars here. We have a high population of them, and they're huge. I mean, these cougar get to be, in our area, 200, 250 pounds. And I'm like, well, I got my hunting rifle. But they're saying, how are you going to shoot a cougar if it's on your back with a hunting rifle? So I went out and purchased my very first handgun. So I bought a Hi-Point 9mm pistol, which isn't a bad gun, but it's heavy. And as I get into this story, you'll understand why I'm bringing up the gun being heavy. So opening day morning comes, and my son and I were out bright and early before the sun comes up. We get our spot, and we're sitting there. And a good friend of mine and his brother were just down the way from us, which was a good thing because they knew the area a lot better than me, and we were able to go hunting with them. And if we got a deer and it was in a bad spot, we'd have some help getting it out. Now, I'm always joking that you have to be half mountain goat to hunt around here because these mountains on the coast are steep and they're just so overgrown with trees and everything. It is real hard to get around. So if we did get a deer in a bad spot, we'd have help hauling it out. And we hunted all that morning and into the evening. And about noon, we had a windstorm come in, bringing a lot of rain and high winds. And typically here on the coast, the best deer hunting is in the clear cuts. But if you're getting a lot of rain and wind, the deer will vacate that and they'll go into the trees. And so that's what we were doing. We were going to go into the trees, which makes for some really miserable hunting because you're in there, you're getting wet, you're climbing and crawling and ducking and everything else. And I'm not young anymore, so it's a little tougher for me. But we had found this old logging road that was all overgrown. I mean, you could barely drive a vehicle down there. I think like a Volkswagen Bug you could drive it down there and still the branches would be hitting the windows on the sides. But we were sheltered from the wind, and we thought, well, there was a lot of grass growing along the sides and stuff, and so, it looked good for deer. And the road had branched off, and my friend and his brother went to the right, and we took the fork to the left. We walked maybe 300 to 400 yards down this road, and seeing all kinds of sign of deer, elk. So we were kind of hopeful that we would see something. Now, friends, have you ever been out in the woods or out anywhere and you just start getting this really bad vibe? Something's wrong. Something's not right. Kind of a spooky feeling where the hairs on the back of your neck start standing up. That's what was going on with me. Something wasn't right. I felt like we were being watched. In fact, I remember saying something to my son about it. And about that time, I started hearing this noise. Now, at first, I thought maybe it was just a tree rubbing against another tree in the wind, but it wasn't. It was this low kind of growling noise that we were hearing. And then all of a sudden that light bulb went off in my head. It's like cougar, mountain lion. Now, friends, remember that pistol I was talking about? I had been lugging that thing around with me all day, and my hips were killing me from the holster. And so I had left the gun in the truck, in the cab of the truck, which was a big mistake. And at this very moment, my brain is working overtime. My thoughts are just flying. First thing I did is I told my son, that's a cougar. We need to get out of here, and we need to get out of here now. And I also remember telling my son, whatever you do, do not run. Let's walk out of here and keep your eyes glued to the back of your head, because cougar like to come up from behind. Now, because I didn't have that pistol with me, I'm thinking to myself, now if that cougar jumps out and jumps on me, what am I going to do? What's going to happen? Now that's where my thoughts have gone. I'm already thinking about what am I going to do if that cat attacks me. Because he's not going to attack my son, because I will jump in the way. I'll protect my son with my life. And at that moment, I'm thinking, well, my son's probably going to try to shoot the cougar if it jumps me. And so I'm thinking, and I told my son, whatever you do, if that cougar jumps me, do not shoot down at it. Shoot from the side, because I didn't want the bullet to go through the cougar and into me. That's how fast and how quick that my mind was thinking. I was being very thorough and everything. It was amazing how quick everything comes to you when you're in a situation like that. Now at this point, we've not seen this cat yet, but we could hear him growling. And the area that we were hunting had been logged out several years ago. So what was growing there was what we call, here on the coast, we call reprod, which basically means trees that have been planted by man, and they're so close together and so dense you can't see into them. It's basically a wall of trees, kind of like a hedgerow or something. And so we turned and we're getting out of there. But the whole time we're walking, I can hear this cougar behind us to my right, growling, following us. Now this road is only maybe 10 feet wide because of it being so overgrown. And if a cougar is within, I think, 11 or 10 feet from a human and it pounces on you, you do not have enough time to react. That's how quick they are. And folks, all of this is going through my head, just jing, 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 jing. Now I push my son on the other side of me to the left, and I put myself in between that cougar and my son. Because I'm thinking, my son's like 10 years old. If that cougar's going to attack, it's going to be my son. Now, folks, a full-grown cougar can take down a full-grown elk. And for those of you that do not know how big an elk is, it's roughly about the size of a horse. So a cougar taking down a full-grown man is nothing. It's easy. Now, true, cougar attacks are very rare. It doesn't happen. In fact, it's very rare that you ever see a cougar out in the wild. But at this point, I got one stalking us. Obviously, he's not afraid of us, because he didn't run away, because the other 2 times that I have had a cougar confrontation, the cougar has always ran away. This time, however, it was not doing that. It continued to follow us and growling that low growling noise. We probably walked maybe 100 yards when I decided I was going to shoot my rifle into the embankment next to the road, because at this time the cougar is about 20 feet to my right and standing on ground that's a little higher than what we are. So folks, not a good scenario, because if that cat jumped out of the trees, he would have been about my shoulder height. And cougars always go for the neck or the head. Like I'm saying, all of this is going through my mind as I'm walking down this old logging road. So I fired a shot into the embankment with my .30-06, and that's a loud noise, thinking that noise would scare the cougar away, right? Well, we didn't hear any noise of anything running off, but the growling had stopped, and we continued to keep on walking down this road. And I would estimate about another 100 yards. I told my son, I said, I don't know about you. I don't know if I'm having a sensory overload or what, but I swear to God that cougar is still following us. And I remember my son saying, yeah, Dad, me too. And then it was right at this moment, my son goes, look, Dad, I seen it cross the road behind us. And I turned to look. Now, I didn't see anything. And I asked my son, well, what did you see? And he says, Dad, it was weird. It was low to the ground and it had a long tail. Now, my son's 10. He's probably never seen, well, I know he's never seen a cougar in real life. Now, that cat was slinking across the road, and long tail, well, that's what cougars have, long tails. So I knew my son was telling me the truth. And it was about this time that we had walked in this opening, and so we had a lot of grass to the left of us, and that is where the cougar had crossed over into, was that tall grass. Now my son, he's like, Dad, I can see it. I can see its head. And I'm looking, I don't see anything. Now I have a clip from a video that some a hiker had taken that had a similar situation of a cougar in tall grass. And you look at this and you can understand why I didn't see it. The color of the cougar's fur blended perfectly with that dead grass. I could not see it. So, I mean, they're stealthy. And obviously they're that way so they can sneak up on deer and elk and whatever they're after. That cougar was definitely camouflaged. Now, back at that time, I had purchased my son the whole hunting package. It was cheaper to get him the whole hunting package than it was to get his hunting license and his deer tag. So he had deer, elk, cougar, bear, and everything else, which is weird because it was cheaper for a juvenile to have that than to singly buy him out. So my son had a cougar tag. At this point, I'm done. I told my son, if you see that cougar, if you got a shot, take it. Now, my son, his very first rifle that we bought him was a little 30-30 Winchester rifle, the little lever action. And because he had a hard time sighting up the iron sights, I had made it a little easier for him and put a scope on it. And because we get so much rain and dampness here on the coast, I went ahead and got him the scope covers that you can see through that would protect the lens from getting all wet and everything. And there is like an elastic band on each side that run from one scope cover to the next to hold them in place. And where that elastic band joins into the scope cover, there's a little knob. Well, the scope cover had turned, it had twisted, and the knob was pointing down. And so when my son went to fire his rifle at that cougar, the hammer had bumped that knob and slowed it down enough so that when the hammer hit the bullet, it misfired. It didn't fire at all. And it was about this time that my friend and his brother came running up behind us because they had heard that one single shot that we had shot. And they're thinking, oh, they must have dropped a deer. Let's go help them. And we're telling them the whole story. And we're saying it's right there on that grass. And my son's like, yeah, it's still there. And so my friend's brother pulled out his pistol and just rapidly fired it in the air, unloading the pistol. And we could hear the cougar running through the trees and climbing up a tree, and you could hear the branches breaking. And of course, my friend and his brother, they're wanting to go in there to get the cougar. And my son and I were like, yeah, no, we're done, we're good. Now, I can guarantee you every time that I ever went hunting after that, or even just walking through the woods, I always carry that sidearm. I have never been the same after that confrontation. I always find it quite spooky when I'm out in the woods. I'm always looking over my shoulder and up in the trees. It's kind of like a person being mugged in the city. They're always kind of leery after that. Now, cougar are found throughout the United States, from down to Florida all the way up to the state of Washington, from California all the way up to Montana. They are found in the plains and the desert land and the swamp areas to the Pacific Northwest. In some areas it's real rare to see them, and others you see them more often. The farther from the equator, the larger the cat gets. So down in Florida they may be like 100 pounds. Up in the Pacific Northwest they're 250 pounds. But don't let the weight fool you. A 100-pound cougar can do serious damage to a human. Most times, whenever a human has crossed paths with a cougar, it's only a glimpse. You'll only see them for a split second and they're gone, because normally they'll run from you. Most of the times that you have a cougar confrontation, you don't even know that you had one. You may walk right by them and not even know they're there. But if you ever run across one, and he or she does not flee from you within 5 seconds and it's still standing there, then you know that that cougar is probably looking at you as a food source. Look, I never thought I was going to have a confrontation, and I go out in the woods all the time. Up to this point, I had always figured that cougar were more afraid of us than we were of them. But on this particular day, that cougar, for whatever reason, decided not to do that. Anyway, now that I got y'all freaked out, I think we better end this Fireside chat because I noticed that the fire's starting to go out. And, well, in the dark in the woods, it can get kind of freaky. You never know about some cougar or bear or who knows, even a Bigfoot. Huh? Anyway, you all have a nice evening, and we will talk later. Adios, amigos.